Fantastic. Okay, so, hello. Hi everybody. My name's Johnny and we are doing our first of many 2017 Facebook Lives. And what I want to do is I want to show you throughout the year different things. Tonight we have some very key messages that we want to transmit to you. I'm going to introduce someone very special. This is Emma. Emma, say hi.
Okay.
So Emma's got amazing, amazing textured hair. And I want to show you some tips, some ideas. I want to show you how to play with curls. The things that go wrong, the things that obviously are slightly easier to manage. And one of the things that I'd love, as and if whoever would like to tune in and watch, if you do have any questions about curls, feel free to ask, because for me, curly hair is incredible, but if you don't really understand the textures and how to manage it, it can be very, very difficult to manage. So, main thing you need to think about is your fixed and your variable analysis. So what is that? Fixed analysis is basically the things that you cannot change. So the material that you have to work with. It could be the face shape, it could be the hair texture, it could be if there's any scars or any defects, it could be the head proportion, head size, it could be whether or not the hair has previously been coloured. These are things that basically are fixed. Even though you can change the colour, you can't change the fact that it has already been coloured. So there's certain factors which are basically key to you understanding what it is you're doing and how you're doing it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the length of the hair. That way it becomes a little bit easier to manage. Emma's hair was cut a while ago, so the ends of the hair are quite raw. So what I want to try to do today is show you a few tips when it comes to cutting outlines on curly hair, but also I want to show you how to play and encourage texture. Very, very important. So, I'm going to get somebody to help me simply because we have a lot of hair. So I'm going to introduce you to one of our fantastic team members. This is Alex. Alex, say hello to the guys.
Hello.
Okay, so I'm using a wide tooth comb when I'm working. And the reason why I'm using a wide tooth comb is because it enables me to glide through the hair much easier. Okay, so 105 Buey. And what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to start by cutting my exterior shape first. So I'm going to get Alex to help me hold some sections to make it a bit easier. Head down from bed. Perfect. Okay. All right. Oh, definitely. So there's different ways of cutting a line. I'm going to cut one side at a time. That way it's easier for me to relate to you what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Now, there's different ways of cutting a line. One way of doing it is basically to, if you let go a minute, Alex. One way of doing it is basically allowing the curl to bend to understand the texture of the hair. So if you stretch the hair and then release it, you can basically understand how strong the bend is, at what point the bend becomes too loose and too disjointed. So you can see obviously this hair is a lot more porous, hence why it's got a lot more of an aggressive spring, whereas this hair here is slightly more hydrated. So what you'll find when you're working with a lot of textures is the hairline tends to be always the weakest and the driest. So I'm going to comb the hair down, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my fingers are kept completely square, but I'm going to use a chipping technique to basically soften the line. Okay? Now, a chipping technique basically is when you cut little triangles into the shape. And what that does, it creates a slightly shattered but solid line. Okay? And I'm going to continue working horizontal sections, combing the hair down, making sure the head is in an upright position. And you can see what I'm doing. Can you see as I apply pressure? If you look in the mirror, you can see that the head's tilted. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that I straighten the head and the positioning of the head in order for me to have an even control over my over direction. So again, I'm standing actually slightly off center, but the reason why I'm doing that is so that you can see, ideally what I would do is I would stand parallel to my section with my feet along this line on the floor. That way I know that I'm in full control of my over direction. But in this scenario, I'm just going to tilt my body so that you can access it and see a lot more importantly you see than what I see. So I'm going to calm the hair down. Now if you notice, I'm using a lot of tension in my fingers. Now the reason I'm doing this is because with curly hair, you can afford to use a bit of extra tension in order for you to control it much better. I'm combing the hair down. I'm making sure my fingers are facing the window and the door, and I'm putting my length in using a chipping technique. Now just because you're using a chipping technique doesn't mean that you should be messy, doesn't mean that you shouldn't be in control. And I'm going to work this same sectioning pattern, but as I get up to the top, my sections, in effect, they pivot on top of the ear. So if you look carefully, I've worked horizontally, and now I've come diagonally, almost close to vertical. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been taking quite thick sections. And the reason for that is not necessarily because the hair itself, even though it's quite full, it's not full in density, it's full simply because of the texture. The actual hair itself is actually quite fine. So it's fine in texture, but it's also quite fine in density. But because of the curl, visually it looks very, very, very full and very, very big. And at the end of the shape, you will see the haircut looking very, very dynamic. Now often people have a lot of trouble when it comes to curly hair because they struggle with understanding how much pressure to use when cutting. They struggle to understand the bend in the hair, which is a massive, massive obstacle that people have. Now if you notice, I've cut 3 sections to this point, and now I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. And the reason why I'm doing the same on the other side before I carry on is if I manage my length behind the ear, then after, when I start to introduce the hair around the side, I can then again keep a consistent balance and a method of working. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask me, and Kane, who's watching on Facebook Live himself, will be able to ask me the questions as and when. So again, I comb the hair down, I apply quite a lot of tension so the hair's quite taut, and I use a chipping technique to remove a lot of the length but create a slightly raw finish to the edge. Now a lot of the time when people are working, people like to have like an end result in their mind. So what I'm going to do, or my key messages for this evening, is basically how to achieve a consistent, balanced shape in regards to when cutting a line. And also, another massive key message today will be things like weave cutting, texturizing, twist cutting, these type of techniques, because this is actually going to be quite a raw finished haircut. It's going to be slightly aggressive in movement. It's going to have quite a raw texture to it. It's going to have some really short lengths and some really long lengths, and it's going to feel quite dynamic once it's dry.
We have a question.
Okay. Who's it from?
From Sam.
Hi Sam.
And said, does the Academy accept financial aid or have payment plans?
That's a very, very good question. We're a privately owned company. Myself and Pedro have obviously the control of the business. We don't necessarily, or we've never really investigated that side of the business. What we could do, it's a question that maybe we need to put a bit more investment to find out a bit more information about, is where is she based? Or he, Sam, is it he or she? Are they based in the States or in the UK?
Not sure.
Okay. It's something we can definitely investigate. If anybody has any questions regarding curly hair, and any problems they may have, please, 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 please feel free to ask, and I will do my best to answer it for you. So can you notice I'm using the back, my finger here, this finger here, to control my blade, and I'm basically pushing the blade across by lifting my fingers up.
Sorry, Johnny. Sam's from the Midwest.
Cool. Hey, Sam. So in regards to that particular question, if you email us and explain to us a little bit more about where you are, what you do, how old you are, do you work, are you based in a college, or do you work in a salon, or what your background is, we'd be able to have a bit more of an open discussion about how we can help. We're coming out to the States quite a bit, actually. Okay, let me give you some tips on balance, okay? So, one of the things people do when they're checking their balance is they basically grab the hair like this and they comb it all the way down like that, and they usually allow one hand to move slightly faster than the other. So what we do, or what we try to help people understand, is if you actually close your eyes and run your fingers down the hair with your eyes closed, what happens is you basically heighten the sense of touch and take away the sense of sight. So what happens is it enables you to really feel the texture. Now don't forget, the ends of the hair have been cut quite raw. A couple of things people do wrong is they do this. If you look at the head, they will pick a bit of hair from here, and then they'll pick a bit of hair from here, and then they'll try and check their balance like that. Or another thing people do, which I think is something that people could work on a bit better, is when you're checking your exterior shape, don't lift the hair, don't elevate the hair, because a lot of people, they're checking their external length by doing this. Yeah? When you pull the hair out in any direction, what you should be doing is checking the internal shape. When you're pulling it down, what in theory you should be doing is checking the external shape. Another way, obviously, is checking very visually. So once you've checked it with your fingers, you can check it visually. Obviously, the key area is to control my balance from my body position, my finger angle, and being able to stand back and look at it. By cutting it with a chipping technique, the ends of the hair are slightly raw. Once I've finished the back zone, I'm going to move on to the side zone. So I'm going to work with horizontal sections, like this.
Johnny, there's another question.
Cool.
Okay, and it's about the tension that you're placing on the hair.
Okay.
Is it maximum tension? Obviously you are working with tension, but why?
Good question. Who asked the question?
That was Sam again.
Hey Sam, thank you for asking the question. So with this particular texture, I need control. Now control is something that, especially with curly hair, is vital that you have. Now a lot of people, there's different ways of cutting it. You can cut it through your comb, you can cut it through your fingers with a lack of tension, you can cut it against the skin. In this scenario, due to the length of the hair, obviously cutting it against the skin is not necessarily the best option. So I'm cutting it through my fingers, and I am using a lot of tension, simply because I need to almost have a consistent texture to work with. When the hair is this curly, you can see there's some areas which are really, really almost quite raw, and some areas where the hair is more elasticated. So by trying to work as much tension as I can, I'm trying to get the hair smooth and as clean as I can, so I have a consistent finish.
So would you work with it a little bit more naturally, kind of once it's kind of dry?
100%.
In terms of like pointing or refining, or, so that you actually get a strict technique in there first, and then a slightly looser.
So once I basically create my exterior shape, I'm going to start to work internally. And you'll see when I start to work internally, I'm still going to work with texture, but the techniques that I'm going to use are going to create even more texture. So you can see every time I pull hair here, I put tension here. If you notice, Emma moves her chin to see what I'm doing. So what happens is it basically knocks my balance off. So I need to make sure I keep realigning the hair, making sure the chin is facing the mirror. Okay, very, very important. And can you see how Alex has relaxed his tension in his hand, which is relaxed the tension here. So I'm going to get Alex to hold a bit more tension now. And I'm not going to be scared to use tension over the ear, simply because I'm not, in the end, you'll see what I mean. I'm not going for a really, really strict, disciplined, smooth finish. I'm going to be going for quite a raw, aggressive texture, quite dynamic shape. and you'll see when I move into my internal shape what I mean by that. So take the section with the wide end of the comb and comb through with the tight end of the comb, or the tighter end of the comb. And again, position, before you start cutting, position the head how you want it. It's your responsibility, or my responsibility, to make sure that obviously Emma's head is in the correct position. Don't try and cut it all in one go as well. Don't try and cut the hair in the front and the back at the same time, because you'll have an inconsistent amount of over direction that you're using. Only cut as much as you can in regards to where your fingers have tension. Now I'm quite lucky, I'm quite fat, so my fingers I have really good tension. I don't have a lot of gaps. Whereas quite a lot of people struggle with tension. I don't. Yeah, Alex has some issues with tension. So I try to only cut as much as I can control in regards to the tension in my fingers. And you can see I'm creating a solid but slightly broken line. Now, one of the things you need to really think about when it comes to working with this type of texture is actually your preparation. So we spent a lot of time downstairs shampooing, conditioning and combing through the hair with really strong shampoo and conditioner. What we used the Davines oil shampoo and oil conditioner, which is really good for hydrating hair. And we applied the conditioner, left it on for a good 10-15 minutes and combed it through with the conditioner in.
Another question, Johnny.
Okay, who's it from?
Daniel Rosanna.
Hey Daniel. Daniel or Danielle?
Daniel.
Daniel. Hi Daniel.
Why are you chipping?
Good question, good question. So chipping basically creates a shattered but solid line. Okay, so if you think about club cutting, which is basically this is club cutting. If I comb the head down and did this, that's club cutting. Now, this is obviously, you get the smoothest, cleanest, most defined line. But what I want to try to do is I want to try and encourage texture and movement. So by cutting it like this, the ends of the hair become slightly more raw in finish. The chipping creates a solid but slightly shattered line. And what I want to do is I want to put my length in quite rapidly in order for me to move on to my interior shape, so you can start to see the shape evolving. Now I'm using the tips of my scissors and I'm going in at an angle, so I'm basically supporting it and I'm going in like that. So it's enabling me to take away a lot of the length but create this kind of broken finish on the line. Okay.
Another question, Johnny.
Okay. Who's that from?
Sam again.
Sam. Cool.
Given this haircut may not require some of the different hand positions when holding the shears, would you show us some of those different hand positions and reasons why we must utilize them?
So one more time so I understand the question better.
Given this haircut may not require some of the different hand positions when holding the shears, would you show us some of these different hand positions and reason why we must utilize them?
Good. Okay, I understand. So, if for example I was club cutting, so if I comb the hair down, now can you see again, because of the tension here in Alex's hand, the head's changed position. So this is your job to be responsible, otherwise what will happen is your balance will be off with your line. You probably go round and go slightly shorter. So, I'm combing the hair down, going back to Sam's question. So if you look at my arms, let's focus, if we can, on my arms. If I club cut, my arm is here and I'm basically going straight in, straight out, like this. Okay? If you look at my elbow, you'll be able to see the positioning and the movement. Now, if I'm changing the angle, so now my arm is now closer to my body, so can you see that? I now have more control. And the closer your arm is to your body, the more control you have over the angle of the blade. So if I go directly in like this, so if you look at my body, on my arm on this side, what you'll see is my arm is as close as I possibly can be. But that is pointing, so what that does is it softens the cutting line. So I need my elbow to be facing slightly out in order to give me the angle of my blade to be able to achieve that line. So if you look at my elbow now, it's closer to my body than that, where I'm doing a club cut, but at the same time, it's enough of an angle in order for me to chip the line in. I'll go again. Head position is key. Make sure the chin is facing the mirror. Very, very, very important when trying to create a slightly squarer line. Comb the hair down once with lots of tension, and then again, chip your line in. I'm using the finger again to push my blade along. So I'm using this finger here to basically push my blade along the head, along my fingers. Okay, every time I take the section, every time I comb the hair through, I basically have to reposition the head to give it control. Now you can see that the hair is starting to become drier and drier around the hairline. So what I do is I use DD Mist by Davines, okay? And it's a really good cutting lotion. In fact, it's probably one of my favourite things to use. I use it on absolutely everybody, curly hair, straight hair. You can't really use it because of the fact that it's a water-based product and the hair just absorbs it. It hasn't got any kind of excess heaviness to it.
We've got one more question from Kim Franklin Hickman.
Oh, Kim. Hello, Kim. From South Africa.
Not sure.
Yeah.
Says if one doesn't have such perfect fingers like me, between knuckles, would you suggest cutting with no tension? How would one get the tension consistent?
Okay, so cutting without tension, I wouldn't advise it to put a basic shape in like this, simply because you won't be in control of how fluid your line is. But at the same time, if you have issues with your fingers, what you would end up doing is this. Let me show you. So if you zoom in really carefully, you'd comb the hair down, and luckily it's at a length where I can rest the back of my hand, okay, and I can basically cut it like this. Or if, for example, a lot of people have good tension at this point of their fingers, but they don't here, so just avoid working in this area. If you do have problems with tension, what you can do is basically push one finger slightly in front of the other. The reason why people have problems is because basically the bones are so predominant that when they place them together, the bones will not allow the skin to touch to give you the tension. But if you just push one finger slightly forward or slightly back so the bones don't meet, you'll increase your tension by easily 20-30%. And if you need to, in this scenario, just push it against the skin. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Head position again. Notice every single time before I approach it, I check the head position, I check the dampness of the hair, I make sure I comb from the root so it's consistent in regards to the amount of pressure that's being used. I comb the hair through. Can you see I continue to comb the hair through so that I can see my cutting line, because it's quite hard when you're dealing with hair which is bending constantly and rotating in your fingers. Now usually if I was cutting a line, I would try to avoid rotating my fingers. What I mean by that is I would usually cut it like that with my fingers facing down. Because of the shoulder blade, it causes me a big problem. Because of the texture, it also causes me a problem. So I have to rotate in order for me to be able to see it. If you can, another way of doing it, if you really tilt the head, then obviously the shoulder becomes less of an impact and you can work like this. But because I'm going to go for a really raw texture anyway, it's irrelevant. But if I was going for a really clean, smooth line, then I would definitely recommend you don't bend your fingers, because what happens is you end up graduating your line. In this scenario, it's not a problem because of what I'm going to be doing. But if I was going for just a pure line, then obviously I wouldn't rotate my fingers.
One more question, Johnny. From Kalpesh Dave.
Okay, hello.
As you are moving up the zones, taking out more sections, do you switch from the tighter tip of the comb to the wider? And at what point do you switch?
Very good question. So, Ideally, what you want to try to do, especially if you've got hair which is really tight in texture, to get the comb through the hair, hence why I'm using a wide tooth comb. I could use a Beauty 101, which is basically in effect the same kind of comb, but one's got slightly wider teeth. When you're using curly hair, this is always the best comb to use, either this one or the Blue Beauty, and this would obviously be on slightly smoother hair. Now ideally, when I'm taking my sections, I will use the wide end of the comb. But when I'm cutting it, because I want maximum tension, I want to create as much tension as possible, I use a slightly tighter end of the comb. It's still a lot looser than a regular Beauty, but it's slightly looser, slightly more free, and it allows the comb to glide through the hair rather than fight the hair. Okay, basic length, basic shape, externally done. Okay, I've got rid of a lot of the dry hair. Now before I start working my internal shape, a good little tip would be rehydrate the hair. Okay, so I'm going to use lots of Day again, which is my cutting lotion, but I'm also going to start to use something called oil milk. Now oil milk, again, it's a Davos product, and it's really good for hydration because it's got a kind of milk base to it. And the beauty of what I want to show, and one of the key messages that myself and Andy were talking about the other day, is there's a certain element of our craft that's been lost over the years. And what I mean by that, this is the oil milk. This is the oil milk. And this has got a really beautiful kind of consistency to it. And if you look at it, it comes out like a milk. Really hydrating. Now on finer, smoother, straighter hair, maybe don't use as much as I'm using now, because it is quite strong and it does leave a bit of a residue. Going back to what I was saying before, one of the key things that I think a lot of hairdressers who've been doing it for a long time, and a lot of younger hairdressers who are kind of just coming in, haven't quite established this kind of concept of working from wet to dry. Ideally, working, even a beautiful piece of graduation, by working from wet to dry, you see the graduation expand and swell by itself, rather than constantly soaking the hair down, because you can't actually see that kind of natural progression of the graduation. Working from wet to dry is a really beautiful way of getting through your service and knowing that the haircut will work without your customer or your consumer having to manipulate the hair, because the hair's doing the job for you because of the way you've cut it. So working from wet to dry, I think, is a really important way of growing as a hair cutter. So now I'm going to use a lot of freehand techniques. I'm going to use a technique called twist cutting, okay? And the idea behind this is that I'm going to create lots of shorter hair and lots of longer hair, all randomly placed in different areas. Now, even though they're randomly placed, I'm going to, in a calculated way, position them. And how I'm going to do that is by using columns in which I'm going to work almost like little squares, almost like a chess set, the kind of the way the squares, different squares kind of build up. And I'm going to go shorter and longer on different ones to create different textures. So Alex, if I can borrow you for a second. So I'm going to start on the right hand side. Now I'm going to try and avoid the hairline because it's already quite weak, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a horizontal section using the wide end of the comb, like so. Okay. Thank you, Alex. Okay. I'm going to ignore the hairline, so I'm not going to touch the hairline, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work almost like a cube here. Thank you, Alex. Okay. So I'm going to ignore the hairline. So can you see I've got almost like a little rectangular cube here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to twist the hair, comb the hair through properly, and then can you see the skin? Look how flexible that skin is, okay? In different parts of the hair, that elasticity works very differently, but around the hairline, it's always a lot looser. So if you're going to use tension and be consistent with it, it's not necessarily about how much tension you use, but it's about the consistency. Now, this is a good tip when twist cutting. If I twist the hair this way, like this, backwards, when I cut the hair, what's going to happen is my starting position, if I'm cutting the hair, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to come in this way. So what's going to happen is as the curl unwinds, the shorter hair is going to rotate round this way. If I twist the hair in the opposite direction and do the same motion, what's going to happen is it's going to twist the opposite direction. So if I want the hair to go away from the face, I twist the hair away from the face. If I want the hair to rotate towards the face, I twist it towards the face. So I want the hair to basically lift away from the face. So Andy, if you can come around this side for me. I'll move around. Okay, so I twist the hair around, get it nice and tight. The tighter it is, the more consistent your shape will be. And then what you do, once you get that, it almost looks like a really tight plait. Can you see that? And what you do is you use the knuckle of the blade, so that middle bit of the blade. Now, some people basically grind the scissors through. The problem with that is it ends up breaking the hair and ripping the hair. So what I do is I start and I open and close, like this. Now, if I do this, I create little kind of ridges. So as the hair unwinds, it softens the hair through and creates a lot more texture, and it loosens up the curl, okay? And I'm going to consistently work through in columns and using little cubes throughout my haircut. So if you pull that nice and tight for me, Alex, thank you. And I'm going to take quite large cubes, okay? Now this one is now going to become two. I'm going to separate it. So the hair that I've previously cut, it's important that you get that out of the way. Then the next section you're going to use, it's easier to work on the underneath. So if Alex, if you hold, let me help you. Okay.
Another hand.
You need another hand. So if I get this cube and then pass it to Alex. Now I'm going to start with the hairline. Remember, the hairline's a lot weaker, so you have to be careful how much you do that around the hairline. And again, I'm twisting it away from the face, okay? Look at the skin. Look how elasticated that skin is. Make it consistent. Make sure that the bend in the hair, that you've twisted it, is absolutely consistent and pure. And again, open and close your knuckle of your blade and move down a tiny bit each time like that. Now this is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to do that. So it's consistent, your blade doesn't leave. Now the negative to doing that is it ends up ripping some of the hair. You can actually hear the blade ripping the hair. And it's not, I mean, I personally feel that tearing people's hair isn't the best way to cut it. I've obviously cut that bit there, so I'm going to try and avoid cutting it again. Taking the little cube above, working the same principle. Look how tight I want it. I want it super tight.
One more question, Johnny.
Yeah, no problem.
From Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Can you twist cut on all textures, or is it best to use on curly hair?
You can twist cut on anything. Twist cutting is basically a technique to use to cut hair, whether it's curly hair or straight hair. It's absolutely fine. It's just to understand why you're doing it. So a lot of people twist cut to avoid working clean. Whereas what I'm doing, you can see, even though I'm twist cutting the hair, I'm working in a systematic and methodical way. Again, working in a column like this. You can do it on straight hair, but you need to understand the angle of the blade in which it's coming into the hair. So this hair here, I've already done it, so I'm not going to disturb that hair, and I'm going to work really, really systematically and with a kind of momentum. Let me come on this side. With a momentum. Now I'm constantly standing on this side of the head to make it easier for me. And again, every time I move like half a centimetre down. And you could go a lot deeper. When you close your blade, you can go a lot deeper, or you can just grade the top of it. And what's happening is it's creating this kind of expansion in the shape because of the fact the short hair springs. When the short hair springs, it basically adds like a support mechanism. So the hair lifts up and becomes a lot more vibrant. in regards to the texture. Again, look, I'm moving up slightly, and I'm going to work cubes the whole way through my haircut, the whole way. And I'm trying to avoid recutting the hair that I've previously cut. Very, very important. You must have control. Even though you're approaching it in a very loose way, you still need to have a system, otherwise you ends up just becoming a mess. It doesn't function the next day, it doesn't have the same principles. Now, if you look at it, as I go higher up into the hair, where the hair is slightly more dense, what's going to happen is, it's going to allow me, because the hair's thicker, to basically go a little bit deeper with my texture. Again.
We have a question from Gianluca.
Gianluca.
Gianluca Gray. He says, Johnny, you still elevating the twists?
Okay, good question.
How soft it will be?
So every section, if you notice, initially I'm pulling it out from the base. Can you see that? Initially I'm pulling it out from the base. That way I have a consistent tension. And then as I go to cut it, you can de-elevate it to make it easy for you so you don't have to bend as much. Or you can leave it straight out. There's not really, I don't really see a difference as such. But when I'm actually picking it up and rotating it, I am pulling it straight out from the base. Okay, can you see I've created almost like this little rigid, and as you release it, the shorter hair unwinds in different ways. And all this is doing is hollowing the hair out, and it's creating this, it's going to allow me after to create this really big, kind of beautiful shape, which has lots of texture to it.
Daniel Rosana asks you, do you count numbers of cut on one cube?
Very, very good question. You can do, it's a very good question. I haven't been. I'm just working depending on the length of the hair, but you can literally do, for example, close your blade 5 times from the top of the hair to the bottom of the hair. It's a very good question. You can do it. I'm not. I'm working based on the density of the hair. And again, because I'm around the hairline, I have to be careful how much I do this now. Yeah, because I don't want to lose the outline. Now, one thing that you can also focus on is where you start. So the closer your blades go to the root, the more weight and length you remove. The closer your blades are to the end, the more weight you just take away from the ends of the hair. And I'm going to work the whole shape with this cubic kind of idea. And ideally what's happening, I don't know if you've noticed it, but the hair that I've already done, I haven't been soaking it, I haven't been wetting it, I'm letting it dry, so I want it to work from wet to dry. So that way after, once it's dried, naturally, I can see and understand what it is that I need to do. Do I need to use more freehand? Do I need to change my technique? So I'm going quite tight to the root, you see that? And my distance between each one, I'm trying to keep it consistent. You can go here, then go here, then go here, but then you've got lumps of weight inside. You can see it makes the whole shape really transparent. Okay, so I've done half the head, so I'm going to come back and again work in columns like this going around and finish this whole side first, okay?
One more question from Calversdale.
Okay.
So this twist cutting method will also help distribute the weight of the curls from all being on the external shape?
Yeah, so obviously with twist cutting, I'm removing weight internally, but at the same time, even though I'm removing weight internally, I'm instantly affecting the weight distribution on the external shape. So now, can you see the hairline's so weak? So I don't want to make that too raw around the face. So I take that away, okay? And again, the same principle. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a little, now you've seen the technique, I'm going to add a little bit of speed to get through my shape a bit quicker, okay? Again, focusing on making sure the hair's coming straight out and then twisting it effectively. Now, for those of you who kind of know how I cut hair, or I've had the pleasure of meeting before, you'll know that I love cutting hair mechanically. For me, that's my #1 passion. So doing something like this, for me, is always quite fun because it's out of my comfort zone. But one of the things that me and Andy were talking about the other day is this idea of cutting hair wet to dry and really showing people how to enjoy curl rather than be scared of curl, how to enjoy working with texture and understanding texture rather than being scared of texture. Again, release the texture. Release that texture. This is a great technique to use. And in the salon, if you're going to do this, the only way you can work this methodically in a timely manner is to have somebody physically help you. If you don't have somebody helping you, it's very difficult to keep using clips, keep moving around the head, keep working as clean and systematic without somebody helping you hold hair.
You need an Alex.
Yeah, you need to hire Alex for the day, and he'll come and help you do your client. So again, I'm trying to avoid, I've distributed my product, I've put a nice consistent amount of product on, and I'm not going to keep soaking the hair because I want it to have that sense of naturally drying into position. Just cutting it again, going as tight as I can with the twist. Can you see now the hair's becoming a little bit denser now? So I can afford now to go a little bit deeper with my cutting. And you can see as it unspirals, you get all these shorter lengths and these longer lengths all coming through the shape. Now, this is a really good technique to use on someone with very, very thick hair as well. Okay? But what you want to try to avoid doing is, in some scenarios, you would avoid working, for example, over the top of the hair. So the hair that's visible. You'd stop where the head rounds off, or you'd stop where the hairline gets weak. And again, don't forget, I'm rotating away from the face. I'm not rotating onto the face.
Another question from Daniel. It says, is the cube have the same size?
Okay, very good question. So, depends on the density of the hair. It depends on basically how quick you want to apply your technique. Ideally, you want them to be as consistent as possible. But that being said, in some areas of the hair, maybe due to previous haircut, maybe due to the amount of density the hair naturally has, in some areas the hair might be slightly finer, in some areas the curl might be slightly different. So as long as you try and be as consistent as you can, then you're adding a bit more control element to it. It doesn't mean it's right, it doesn't mean it's wrong. You could take wider sections. The only thing you've got to remember is the wider the section, the less impact you're having into the centre of the hair that you're cutting. You're affecting all the perimeter of it, but you're still keeping that element of density there.
We got a question from Mark Hayward.
Hey Mark.
Does the angle of the scissor determine how much weight is released?
I would say more to do with the depth in which you're going rather than the angle. You could go like that, you could go like that, you could go like that. I think, me personally, the more closer to vertical you go, the more deeply you tend to cut into the hair. So that's a very good question as well. Again, I'm working in cubes, and I'm working this sense of looseness to the shape. Comb it through first, and then once you've combed it through, then start ringling it. Then start twisting the hair. I just want to say to the people watching, whoever's watching, I just want to say thank you very much for tuning in, because we've been talking as a team in regards to something we can do to give back to the hair community. Obviously we have a lot of other people in the market doing some really special stuff. So for example, our friends Randy and Gerard from Hairbrain. They're doing some incredible Facebook Lives, and I think this idea of sharing, this idea of really trying to connect with people everywhere around the world, and we have that opportunity with mediums like Facebook, with mediums like shows and seminars that we do and things like that. And I think being able to work with people like Hairbrain, with people like people who have that kind of reach, people who have that kind of mission, I think has a massive impact in sharing with people. And one of the things that as a creative team we wanted to try to do is share with you throughout the year so that we feel that kind of connection constantly. And every week we're going to try and show you different things. Can you see I'm taking a lot more weight away now, which is making the shape a lot lighter. You can see the hair will start to grow and curl and bend in different ways. And you can also see how dense this area is compared to the density of this area here. I'm coming up to the last section on the right hand side. Now again, we talked about being careful how short you go on the top, but in this scenario I want to create that texture through the top, but again I'm going to avoid the front hairline because I don't want there to be too much of a short length around the face. Now when I come to the top section, which is my last section on this side, I'm actually going to work a lot further away from the root. So by working a lot further away from the root, what basically happens is you still encourage the texture, but you still keep an element of length to it. So instead of going down here to start, I'm going to start here. So I keep an area of density. I can start further up to keep it even denser.
We've got a question from Daniela from Mexico.
Daniela, hello.
Could you combine rotating to one side and then to the other?
So on the other side, what you're going to see, which I'm going to be demonstrating to you, is I'm going to rotate the hair again away from the face, which makes it slightly harder for you if you're left-handed, but it's a good way of keeping that consistency. You can rotate it forward, which again will encourage the hair to move and wrap that way around the head. But ideally, what I want to try to do is keep some kind of consistency in my shape.
We've got another question from Craig Boland.
Craig, hey Craig.
Would you cut the internal before the external in case the line became too weak?
Okay, so if the mission was to cut to keep the outline dense, if that was the main goal, what you would do is you wouldn't use this technique until at least an inch or an inch and a half, maybe even 2 inches away from the hairline. You'd basically do it in like a thin column running through the centre. You'd avoid going anywhere near the perimeter. That way you keep the external weight in the shape. If you do the internal shape or the external shape, it's irrelevant which one you do first in this scenario. It all depends on where you're applying this particular technique. So if you want to keep the outline solid, don't do this technique around the outline. That would be my advice. I hope that answered your question.
And Kelly Greenin.
Kelly?
Yes.
Hey Kelly.
Hello, question from South Africa.
Okay.
When dealing with ethnic hair,
Okay.
would you take bigger sections and space the cutting, so larger sections?
Okay, so ethnic hair, I'm assuming she's talking about black hair, or Asian hair maybe, or Indian hair, or maybe even Chinese hair maybe. The width of the section that you're taking is relevant to the texture in which you're working. Just because, for example, the person could be Chinese, for example, it doesn't mean that the texture will always be the same. Everybody's a complete individual. And that's the beauty about what we do. So it comes down to your decision making. Alex, if you go on the other side for me. It comes down to your decision making. So for example, if you can tell that the hair texture is very, very dense, maybe you would do it a lot quicker, a lot sooner, you'd go a lot tighter. Thank you, Alex.
She's talking about afro hair.
Afro hair, okay, so afro hair, obviously the more distance you have between each one of these, each twist cut that you're doing, the more dense the hair in the end stays. Now if you're working with a natural afro, that's one thing, and if you're working with a relaxed afro, that's a different thing. So if you're working with, for example, relaxed afro hair, it's similar in principle to, say, straighter hair, but the difference you have to remember is it's all very well to do it on dry hair, but what happens when the hair is wet? So once the hair becomes wet, it becomes slightly harder to get it as smooth as, say, Caucasian hair, for example. So my advice would be, it all depends on the amount of density that you want to keep within your shape in the end. And analyze every single client or customer or model completely independently, regardless of the race or the creed of the person, because everybody's hair responds and reacts differently. Everybody has different growth patterns, different head shapes, different movements. Can you see just then, my last bit of section, I took the end a little bit too much off. So be mindful when you're doing that. So if you do have that scenario that I just have, my next section, I'm going to leave it slightly heavier on the outline so I fill up this space that I've just accidentally taken away. Thank you. So again, next section.
A question from Kristen Brinson.
Hi, Kristen.
So how frequently can you utilize this technique on the same client? Is that based on the density as it grows? Back in? Thank you.
Exactly. So for example, let's say for example, next time Emma has a haircut, she might not need to do all this particular thing again. All she might need to do is just maybe strengthen the outline a little bit. So it all depends on how quickly the hair grows out. It depends on how easily manageable she's made it, if she's found it difficult, if she's found it easy. You don't want to keep doing this same technique because you'll just keep hollowing the hair out and you'd end up with quite fine hair. So you need to be really careful. 1 second, Alex. Let me get some control in here. So if you want to, every so often just stop, get some control, make sure it's super clean so you're working with much more control over your shape. Now, remember, I want to keep an element of density here because of the fact that the blade closed slightly too much on that last section. Again. So in that scenario, what I'm going to do now, to try and fill that space, what I do is I basically, with the same twist cutting, again, I'm twisting it away from the face, which is basically this way now, because I'm working on this side. I'm going to twist with this hand, so I'm working away from the face. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit less on this section to maintain a bit more weight in that area. That's brilliant, perfect, thank you. Some great questions, guys. Just going back to the conversation about kind of afro hair and working with that kind of texture. Was my answer, I mean, is it clear, or do you want me to maybe elaborate in a slightly different way, or just asking that question out there and seeing how the feedback is. The main piece of advice I would give you is treat everybody completely independently when making your decisions. You know, before we talked about fixed analysis. So fixed analysis is basically what you have to work with, the things that you cannot change. Then you have what we call variable analysis. Variable analysis are the things you can change. So to give you some examples, it could be choice of length, it could be balance, it could be weight distribution, it could be so many things. These are things that you can change. You can change the positioning of the weight, the positioning of the length, the distribution of length and weight. You can control, obviously you can change the colour, you can change the density by using different cutting techniques.
I've got a question from Liz Cabana.
Liz?
Yeah.
Hey Liz.
So in which section will you start twisting away from the face? That's from the other side.
Good. So I started basically through here, but I avoided the hairline. So I stopped. The very first tube that I did was here, but I actually kept almost like a centimetre or 2 centimetres of hair out from the hairline. So I started, in theory, you could say I started just above the ear. And again, I need to remember to rotate this side away from the face. That way the bend and the shorter hair start to move backwards.
Viewers from Costa Rica, South Africa,
Oh.
Greece.
Welcome guys.
Let's go.
Thank you for joining us. Now we're going to be doing this every single Tuesday to try to share as much as we can with you guys. And every week we're going to try and cover like a different discussion, a different topic. If you have anything specific you'd like to see, it could be interesting to maybe let us know, maybe send us an email. But we've got a little bit of an agenda that we're trying to get across to you guys. So we're going to be working on curls, on longer hair, on shorter hair, on straight hair, on wavy hair. We're going to be doing blow drying tips. We're going to be doing lots of different things to help us share as much as we can. Thank you. And again, can you see I'm leaving the hairline out in the front? Alright, so look, I'm twisting it the wrong way. So come out and remember what you're doing. Don't lose focus of what you're doing. Twist it in the right direction in which you want the hair to move. So I've got a couple more sections before I start using complete freehand with no physical control, no sectioning pattern, no mechanical approach, just purely visual. And again, remember to twist away from the head, away from the face.
A question from Benjamin Talbot.
Hey Benjamin.
So isn't that gonna make the curly really frizzy?
Yes, what it's going to do is encourage the hair to be quite raw in finish. Obviously you can control it with product, but this type of hair, it's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be quite wild, it's supposed to be raw. Obviously you can tame it with product, but you could tame it with or without. But by doing what I'm doing now, what you're going to find is it's going to become very, very kind of airy, very loose, not so kind of structured. It's going to have a lot more of a wilder finish to the texture. So again, I don't know if Benjamin just now tuned in or whether he tuned in a while ago. Depending on how you close your blade will determine if you basically look the more raw and rip the hair is. So if you just glide your scissors, in effect you'll be tearing the hair slightly. So, but what I'm doing is I'm opening and closing, so I'm physically just cutting length shorter. Yeah, I'm not ripping or making the hair aggressive in regard to the kind of tearing of the hair. I'm physically cutting it. You can see there's an element of weight still here. So this is the hairline. There's still an element of weight. So I'm going to take a slightly smaller square just here. Just remove some of the weight through there. And this is where you start to personalise it a little bit more. Oh, rotate it backwards. See again, you've got to constantly remember. And if you've got a client that's talking to you, you've got to make sure that you remember what it is you're doing. Get it as tight as you can. Make sure it's consistent. And very gentle. Because I'm around the hairline, I'm going to be even more gentle.
And he says, hello from Toronto and your Metro family.
Oh, is it Anthony?
Yeah.
Give him a hello. Bless him. Very, very talented young man he is. And a very, very humble man as well. Got a lot of time for Anthony. Okay. So I'm coming up to the last couple of sections through the top. I've basically, in effect, got 2 more columns to cut. And then I'm going to start to work freehand. So we're doing a lot of travelling this year. We're very lucky. We've got an amazing year planned. We're going to be we're going to be coming to Canada quite a few times this year. Potentially at the moment we're coming 3 times. We're coming to Metro Beauty, which is based in Toronto. Frank and the team there have invited us back. We go there now 3-4 times a year, and we've really the market has really grasped the principle of Allilon and our education journey. One of the things, if it's the first time you're ever tuning into Allilon, one of the things that you'll learn is that our curriculum is all based on a journey. So people who have done the primary shapes, for example, usually have done the primary shapes maybe 2-3 times. And then what they're doing is they come back, and then from primary shapes, they go to primary mechanics, and primary mechanics they go to primary disconnection, they go into advanced disconnection, then potentially barbering, then diagram training, then teacher training. So over the past 6-7 years now, we've been building the network in somewhere like Toronto and in South Africa. Those are kind of like our two main hubs at the moment. Philippines is stepping up quite a bit. Vietnam's stepping up quite a bit. We're doing quite a lot of stuff around the world, but the pattern of the main goal of our education at the moment is kind of penetrating in Toronto and in South Africa. So if you're interested and you want to come to any of the classes anywhere, if you email us at info@Allilon Education, and what we will do is we will communicate and arrange with you where you can go, put you in contact with the right people. That way, I wonder who that is calling me.
We got a question from Michaela Fiedler.
Oh, Michaela, hello, from Germany.
Yeah.
Till I'll see you in a couple of months.
Do you respect any parting on the top section?
No, so I'm working up to the centre. So I'm working every section going up to the centre parting. And I'm normally, like I said, I would avoid going around the top, around the centre of the hairline. But at the same time, I don't mind if there's shorter bits and longer bits. So ideally, there's my centre parting. Yeah. So I'm going to work all the way up to my centre parting. So this is going to be the last column that I'm going to be doing. And then I'm going to start to actually introduce, Alex, come on this one. Thank you. I'm going to start to introduce, can you see I've got the shorter hair from the other side. I need to make sure I don't recut that hair again. So I'm going to leave that hair out. So you can work, Michaela, and leave the parting out. So leave the hair out just on the parting to keep a little bit of extra weight. Don't forget the last section that I did. If you can remember what I did, I don't know if you were tuned in, but I cut it from the mid-lengths to the ends. I avoided going near the roots quite a lot. So you just got to remember the pattern that you've done. So now, again, I'm judging mid-length. I love cutting curly hair.
A question from Tonic Hairstyle.
Tonic in Greece. Hi, boys.
So would you alternate the direction of twisting?
You could do. You could do. Very good question. If you was to alternate the direction of twisting, what would happen is the hair would have little battles internally, which would again create lots more movement and lots more freedom within the hair. That's actually quite a nice thing to do. In this scenario, and you'll see later on, I'm going to dress a lot of it away from the face, hence why I'm twisting it and cutting it away from the face. In fact, that's the wrong way I'm twisting it. Let me concentrate 1 second. So you've always got to remember, otherwise, if you just do something different, that is twisting it away from the face, okay, like that. Always remember what you're doing, otherwise what will happen is it will be inconsistent in its shape. So you can do it, and if you do it, where each one is slightly different in different directions, you have this kind of battle and clash of the movements, which is quite interesting. It's really cool.
Gianluca Greggy said, can we play some Johnny's music next time?
Okay, next time I'm going to have my playlist in the background. I just need to make sure you can hear me properly.
And Justin James asked if you have any news on the launch of your new scissors.
Okay, very good question. So basically, we're in a situation as we speak where we've had our new scissors basically sent through now. So we've got a nice big stock of them now. And we're looking on it expanding our scissor portfolio. So we have a straight blade, a bent blade, one which basically sits slightly more ergonomic in the hand, and one which is slightly more classic in feeling. We're still developing that one, so that one's not ready, but the one which is basically ergonomic, which basically looks like that, is ready. So if you're interested in buying a pair of scissors, let me get it like that. If you are interested in buying a pair of scissors, all you need to do is email info@Allilon Education and give it a go. Give them a go. We're in a situation now where we're constantly evolving the scissors, constantly kind of changing the dimension, changing the weight, changing the positioning to really make them the best scissor on the market. That's our goal, and it's an interesting journey. It has ups and downs.
You guys want me to claim as if all Lithuania loves you?
I don't know if the whole of the country, maybe. There's probably some people who don't. Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to start to allow the hair to dry by itself. Now look in the mirror. If you look in the mirror, you'll be able to see the shape evolving. I'm going to let the hair become free. I'm going to allow it to dry. I'm not going to use a lot more product, not yet. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to work a lot more freehand. So I'm going to randomly pick up the hair, let the hair drop, and work a lot more looser. And what's going to happen is, this is basically loosening up the shape. So I have some shorter hair, some longer hair. I don't want it to feel like a structure. I don't want it to feel like a solid shape. So by getting my blades inside the haircut, and by working it through, this particular haircut, you're actually going to, what's interesting about it is you're going to see it as part of our next collection, based on the colour process as well, which is an interesting collection. I'm not going to give you too much information because we're photographing it in next week. Andy, is that right? Next week we're going to be photographing it, and Emma's one of the girls we're going to be shooting, so I'm doing a little bit of a sneaky peek prep as we speak, and then Maddie and the colour team are going to do an amazing colour for me. And it's going to be quite an interesting collection because it's very, let me find the best way of not giving it away. It's very free-spirited with elements of really, really core, pure kind of technique. Now, can you notice when I'm slicing, I'm using slicing now, and I'm also using pointing. Now, if you close your blade as you go in, like this, what happens is you take a lot more weight away. If you close your blade as you leave the root dent, so you remove the weight from the edges. So there's elements of me basically using a slicing technique, and again, I'm not gliding the blade through and not opening and closing the blade because that will tear the hair. I'm opening and closing the blades constantly to loosen up the hair. And then when I'm lifting the hair up and I'm pointing, I'm closing the blades as I go in to take away the weight internally. Now, you can, again, work systematically. In other words, what you can do is you can basically go like this. You lift the hair up, start here, go 1, 2, 3. Then let the hair drop, 1, 2, 3. But I don't want it now to feel like there's any compact shape. I want every time to move the hair for it to feel differently and feel loose and feel vibrant and feel alive. And you can see, if you zoom in on the mirror, you can see the shape is going to start to evolve as it dries. Yeah, because you can see there's shorter hairs, there's longer bits of hairs. It's going to be a really beautiful dynamic shape. And I want to try and avoid having too many random short hairs on the top. But this is a really beautiful way of having fun with curls and playing with curls and allowing it to be free. Because you'll see when Emma stands up, she's a beautiful girl. She makes me look tiny, not that I'm that tall. But I want her to really stand out, and I want her to look incredible, and I want the hair to have this sense of freedom. And I'm going to work from wet to dry, so I'm not going to blow dry the hair. I'm just going to keep it loose, keep it drying, and keep reviewing the shape, seeing how it moves. You see this looseness that it's got now, whereas before it was so compact. You know, whereas now, when we get an air kind of hair dryer in it or a fan in it, and we're shooting it, it's going to have this beautiful, soft, elegant kind of freedom to it, and it's also going to have a really cool colour by the team. And you can see the hair springing in different ways now. So I've cut my outline mechanically. I've cut my texturizing mechanically. Now I'm working purely visual, I'm working it free, I'm allowing the hair to dry by itself. And what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to start to work some product into the hair so it starts to dry with product in. Now it helps when you've got a beautiful texture to work with. See, I could start to think about putting a fringy bit in, like a shorter piece of hair around the face, but when we style it on the day of the shoot, I want there to be a bit of length there so we can manipulate the texture. Okay, so now I'm going to use some oil. This is the Davros oil, and I'm going to absolutely coat the hair in it. And what's going to happen is it's going to feel oily at the begin with, but the more I work it, the less and less oil it's going to get. So what we do is back and front of the hands, so the hands are absolutely saturated, okay? Tilt the head back for me. Yeah. And then the first thing I do is I slowly just rake the product through the hair. With open hands, I just rake the product through like this. Okay? And I don't want the hair to be smooth. Now I start to almost kind of caress the hair and grab the hair and run my hands around it. So I'm basically making the hairs become a little bit more integrated. So it becomes a little bit more kind of locky. I don't know if that's the right word.
A lot of parts, a lot of thank yous.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Believe me, I'm very grateful genuinely that people are logging in to have a look, and I really do want to create this kind of culture of sharing, and really what we're going to be doing is having a schedule where all the team are going to be having some time with you all, and we're going to be showing you so much different stuff throughout the year. Start to really apply it on the hairline. Let the hairline come alive, because the hairline is the most dehydrated. Really start to make the product through. And when your palms are dry, take it from the back of the hand and redistribute it through the hair. You see I'm almost coating the hair at the root. And then I start to work it through the outside. I don't mind if the outside tends to start to become a bit more dry. Remember, it's not supposed to be set, it's not supposed to be finished, so later on when I start to get the hair dry, in the shoot for example, the hair will feel a lot lighter and it will have that sense of movement. I don't want to over dry the hair because I want to try and work from wet to dry, but just because we're filming it, I just want to speed the process up a little bit, and again I'm trying to avoid over drying the hair too much. This is purely so you guys don't get bored watching the hair dry by itself. And if you look in the mirror, you can really see the shape coming alive. I love the way the texture is coming alive. Put the hair down for me. As far down as you can. So normally what you would do is you could just leave it to dry by itself. But just put it literally for the time purpose, because we're on Facebook Live, I'm just speeding the process up a little bit. So fully, I'm just letting the hair dry. And I've got the oil in the hair. she's got some lipstick on, some beautiful kind of vibrant lipstick. Her lips will just stand out from the shape because it's so aired out now. It's so loose. And now it's just about having fun with it. Keep it loose, just stretching it out. Look what I'm doing with my fingers. Just kind of twisting it and letting the haircut come alive. This bit here, can you see, as I'm styling it, it's standing up, but there's an element of it that wants, the weight of it still wants to fall forward. Can you see that? So I need to soften that weight there. I could do that by removing some of the length, or I can do it by removing a little bit of the density. And I'm going to do it by, I'm going to keep the length, I'm just going to remove a little bit of the density. Okay, so I'm just going to gently slice cut that area. And if you do it this way, so watch carefully, if I come from the underneath and go this way, what happens is, again, there'll be some slightly shorter hair in front, which will support the shape. And it will help the hair sit away from the face a little bit easier. That's better. That's better. Okay. Now, just before you finish, again, a tiny bit of oil. Head back for me, as far back as you can go. Just grab the hair and twist it like this. And apply your product and let the haircut do all the work now. Let it do all the work. Don't over style it. Head up for me. Don't over style it. Let the haircut do the work.
We have a question from
Georgios.
He said, with so much texture, it won't be a problem if she doesn't use a styling product?
If you didn't texturize it, or if you did, either way, the hair needs either to be controlled with product or left alone. Even if you didn't use product, it would just be even more kind of wiry and loose. If you use product, you can obviously get a much smoother finish. My music.
Somebody asked for music? Seconds.
Can I do me a favour? Just shake your head around and get your hands in there. Tell me how it feels. You know, and by doing it like that, by cutting it the way we have, we can manipulate the hair when we're styling it for the shoot. We can manipulate the hair, make it tighter in certain areas, you know, kind of backcomb it in a little bit. We can loosen it up. We can pull areas down, push bits in, and have that sense of complete freedom on the shape. I hope you like it. I hope you've enjoyed watching us do it. Thank you for your questions. I really genuinely appreciate you logging in, and I appreciate you getting involved and asking me lots of questions. Do you have any more questions before we log out? If you do, ask them now or forever hold your peace. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for enjoying our hair Facebook Allilon Unplugged session, and we'll see you next Tuesday at 7 o'clock, same time, same place. See you later, guys.